Trixie the Golden Witch once said that you only really need a single episode to determine if you're going to enjoy an anime or not. Even though in some cases the premise is not fully laid out until a few episodes in, the most infamous case probably being Madoka Magica, I would argue, as she does, that the premise hardly matters when determining perceived quality of a show. I was always going to love Madoka, and the first 2 episodes are some of my favorite in anime, with none of that having to do with the premise at all. The second I saw what the Witch's Labyrinth looked like, I instantly knew this was probably going to be a favorite. I couldn't say then that it was going to be my 4th favorite anime of all time, of course, but I was fairly certain it would fall into the top 20 at least, just based on its production qualities. I thought the same thing with Amoria. Based on just the first trailer without any of the premise laid out, I determined that if this wasn't a top 5 game for me, I would be disappointed. It's now my 2nd favorite. My point here is that it's not really hard to recognize when an anime, or any media for that matter, is special. I can't exactly explain what I even mean when I use that word, as I feel it in a very abstract way. I suppose it's the feeling of when something just clicks. For me, this usually happens within less than a minute of any given anime, and it's safe to say that Spy Family has fallen into that category. I love spy anime. It's also the genre that I've seen the least amount of anime about, and only one truly special one, Princess Principal. Go watch it. This has created a yearning for me for the next great spy story in the medium. And while it's obvious that I think Spy Family has fit that mold, I hardly want to categorize it as such. It's surprisingly multi-dimensional. And while I love Princess Principal a lot more, at least at the time of this writing, I can't really say the same thing about that anime. I'm here to explain why. I do find it a waste of time to really talk about the production value of Spy Family though, as it's so obviously top tier. Your eyes can see the gorgeous animation, visual editing, and choreography. Your ears can hear that amazing OST and general sound design. I don't have to explain any of these things to you. No, instead, I want to look at the 3 central characters, and how they form perhaps the most unique dynamic I've yet seen in anime. Loid's entire life is seemingly a lie. As a spy, this makes sense, but the show goes out of its way to portray how hardwired he truly is. In one of the most hilarious sequences I've probably ever seen, this man quite literally passes out from exhaustion because he allowed his body to relax for a split second. And while this is played for laughs, it's actually insanely sad that he's become like this. As an orphan, he has nothing. He has lost his entire heritage, and the people that were supposed to raise him to fit the mold that was essentially predetermined for him based on where he was born and who he was born to. He lacks any sense of direction. He is empty. And so he became a spy, as he can now be remolded over and over to play a different person. An anime character I'm reminded of is Kabuto from Naruto, who was also an orphan and also eventually became a spy. He lost any semblance of identity he had, as his rituals, the people around him, the very way he dressed, talked, acted, were constantly shifting, all catered around creating a character that he could never actually relate to. Switching personas so many times, he was eventually left with nothing of himself. He had no identifiable features, characteristics. Everything about him was fundamentally a lie. We're only 2 episodes in a Spy Family, but I have to imagine they'll explore Loid's past in a similar light. And since I trust the anime's writing over that of Naruto, I have high hopes that it will be even more impactful. But we've already seen so much from Loid that we can read between the lines. Despite his tragic past and his own lack of self, he cares. He may not even have a definite name, but he does have a definite heart. His reasoning to become a spy wasn't just because he had nothing, but that he never wanted anyone to end up like him again. He wanted to save children and make sure they wouldn't cry anymore. So when he adopts Anya, he not only starts to care for her, but recognizes that by doing this mission in the manner that he was, by tossing her back into an orphanage to suffer, he was betraying the one wish that he has. And so he doesn't. He keeps her. But he's not just this backstory or motivation. He's just a fun character. Now, that word hardly means much. I mean, what does it mean for someone to be fun? Are they funny? And yes, that is partially the case, but when I think of fun characters, I think of Arcane. And if you've seen Arcane, you know it's far from a comedy. As I said in that very long analysis video, character dynamics require dynamic characters. It's inherently fun to watch people interact with each other. I mean, that's basically all television and cinema even are. We want to see what they'll do, what line they'll come up with next, how hard they're gonna punch that guy. But when characters are one-dimensional, they're predictable, and that excitement is gone. I almost think of character dynamics as a puzzle, with each motivation and characteristic fitting seamlessly with that of another character, in an entire circle that makes up the cast. Of course, that requires said characters to be multifaceted, and I'm very happy to report that not only does Loid fit that incredibly well, but the entire cast does thus far. So, now let's talk about my favorite character. Yor is not what I expected, like, really not at all. She's just not very cool, and that's incredible. Yor lacks pretty much any knowledge of what is going on around her, failing to pick up even small social cues. I originally figured that she'd be a lot like Loid, who at least can keep up a perfect facade. I even thought that her ditzy personality was purely a cover. But no, the anime subverted my expectations in a beautiful way. She really is just that clueless. It was the scene in which she earnestly debates on killing everybody at the party that really sold me on her character. Her voice actor does an incredible job portraying this not as malicious or angry, but just that she genuinely didn't really know what else to do. It's almost as if she has two personalities, which is further evidenced by the scene in which she gets her first assassination mission that we see, as her eyes turn dark in an instant. This is kind of what I expected with two sides of her, but what I didn't expect was how severely underdeveloped one of those sides would be. She is undeniably a certified badass, but she doesn't really have much else to say about her sense of self. This is, of course, a character flaw, not a writing one, and I would argue a genius one at that. Like Loid, she is empty. But Yor is also able to directly contrast him in how that emptiness materializes. While Loid plays as different characters, she instead plays as an NPC. She doesn't really do or seemingly think much of anything, and this can be directly attributed to her parents' death, and the same lack of predetermined development that has afflicted Loid. Unlike him, she is Yor. But then, who really is Yor? The most interesting consequence of this very specific lack is that since she doesn't normally know what to do in her normal form, she naturally looks towards her assassin side for some guidance. This is a horrible idea, of course, as she debates on killing an entire room of seemingly innocent people just because she doesn't know how to properly interact with them or hide her embarrassment. But it's an endlessly interesting one. She knows that this probably isn't a good plan, but she also seems to lack the reasoning to actually understand why it's such a bad idea. That is vital, as one can assume that once her assassin side takes more control over her actions, the less she'll care about killing like that. This makes complete sense, as she was never taught social cues or how to be around people. Really, she was never taught how to be a regular person, but she was taught how to be an assassin. She doesn't need to be a normal person to do that, which contrasts nicely with Loid, as he's a spy. His main job is quite literally knowing how to at least act like a normal person. The only thing Yor was ever taught, since she had no parents, was to kill, not to socialize. I can't wait to see more of these two together on screen, as their chemistry is already special. I'm certain of this because of one moment, which is easily my favorite moment in this entire anime season thus far. When Loid pulled out the pin of a grenade, threw it to kill some evildoers, and literally proposed to Yor with the grenade pin. Are you serious? That was when I was certain that I wasn't on a shoddily put together wooden roller coaster from the 50s that probably should have been decommissioned years ago, but that I was riding the Millennium Force, and I was going to have a great time. Anya. Oh, Anya. Everyone's favorite moe blob. And I don't use that terminology lightly. She's not a moe blob, she's the moe blob. She takes every aspect of moe and brings them to their logical conclusions. And yet, it never once, for even a millisecond, feels forced, allowing her to live almost as an ethereal blob. She can fit into any situation, mold herself to play off any single character you can ever think of. She has a reaction face to everything, and to be able to do that is certainly a monumental task for the writer. She basically defies the laws of what cuteness in anime is, becoming infinite. She's also the glue that holds the entire narrative together. Sure, Loid's mission requires that he have a child and wife, and Yor needs a fake boyfriend to appease and let be happy, the only person she has probably ever had a semi-normal relationship with, but none of that worked without Anya. I mean, she literally is the one who basically got the two together, and her Esper powers are never not entertaining. The story would end after a chapter without her, but even more importantly, she serves as a twist in the premise. Sure, a story about a spy and an assassin hooking up without knowing it is cool, but once you throw in an Esper who is aware of both these lies, yet plays along anyway because spies are cool, well, then you have a dynamic structure that I can safely say I've never seen before. Of course, as I said earlier, premise means very little if the execution is poor, but this anime is anything but poor execution. If it has an idea, and it's got a lot of those, it's going to do it to near perfection. Every single time. I honestly haven't been this excited to see where an anime is going to go in a while. If the queen of rom-com herself, Kaguya-sama, weren't airing right now, I'd easily say this is the show that's got me the most hype out of this season. Just in the first 2 episodes alone, I know this is going to be something special, with production quality and character dynamics on a tier that is rare for any media, let alone anime, to accomplish. I have no fear that this anime will fall flat in its face, as the grenade proposal alone has completely sold me on the brilliance of its writing. A lesser writer just doesn't come up with such a fun scenario. I'm sure I'll have more to say on this anime in the coming months, as I only expect it to go up from here. If you want to hear about some more anime from this season and past, or have interest in video games or the other random things that make up our reality, consider subscribing to the channel. I'll be extensively covering Kaguya-sama this season, and I'm debating on streaming once a week as an anime roundup, discussing the anime that aired that week. We shall see. And, as always, thank you for watching.